Realistic Mandrill Baboon and Daisies Acrylic Painting Tutorial by HotPinkZebraPaper.
Hi everybody, in today's video I have a baboon in a field of daisies painting. This one is just, the look on the baboon's face reminds me of the look on my face if I was sitting and just surrounded by flowers like that. Sounds like a perfect little afternoon. So I hope you guys like this video as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well. Love!
So I'm going to begin by applying a base layer of a very dark green over the background, and I don't have any of the daisies drawn in yet, so I'm just, painting over that entire area, leaving a little ghostly shape of the baboon. So there's a second coat, two nice coats. You want it to be fairly solid, and then I'm going to airbrush some black paint here and there just to kind of break up that background so it isn't quite so solid. Then with a very bright green, I'm going to airbrush a whole bunch of stems in the background, and then with white, add some nice little cloudy shapes of some daisies and add a little bit of yellow in each one. Then I went over and I kind of faded some of them in the background with some of that darker green airbrush color. And then I'm going to begin my mandrill with his face, and I started out by just applying a base layer of color to the area around his eyes, to his nose, and to his little cheeks there. And then I'm going to go through each section on its own and start adding details. And I began with all the area around his face, adding lots of shadows and highlights and wrinkles and all of those wonderful little details that just really give a painting like this life. And so I also just kind of blacked out the eye areas, the actual eyeball for right now, with a layer of black paint so that I could, for some reason, when you have a painting and those eyeballs that are just left on the canvas with no paint for a while, it looks so creepy. So I just kind of filled those in to get rid of that kind of creepy element to it. After that, I'm going to continue detailing down the bridge of his nose and then on his actual little nostrils there. So I add those details going through. Keep adding details and shadows and highlights and wrinkles, and know that you can always come back to an area. And then I'm going to go through and actually detail his eyes. So I'm going to add the color in his eyes with kind of a coppery orange color, add some shadows and some different little tones in it with brown and gray, and have all kinds of colors. Put as many colors as you can in the eye without distracting from the original eye color. Add some really nice bright highlights on the eyes, and then go through and add all of the details on his cheeks, and also fill in and just kind of do the first block color on his chin and his other little lips area with some charcoal paint, some really dark gray paint. And then on those little cheeky areas, the blue, it's kind of a gray blue, so don't make it too bright of a blue, a really pastel muted tone of blue. And then add all the depth to those wrinkles that are there. So mandrill baboons, there's so much color, and they're just so fascinating to me. And I'm not gonna lie, I decided to paint this guy after watching the new Lion King movie this summer, and so I was definitely Rafiki inspired, and I just absolutely love, and I don't know, I think all primates in general, they're just so curious. And so I wanted to, in this painting, I wanted to kind of demonstrate that curiosity with all the flowers. And I can imagine my face would have a similar expression if I was sitting in a field of daisies like that. It would just be so awe-inspiring, I suppose you could say. After I've got just kind of some gray going around his face to help blend it out into the fur area, once I get to that point, I'm going to do all the fun little details of the mouth. So for me, in a painting like this, the most enjoyable parts of it is definitely going to be the eyes and the mouth. There's just so much important, small little details to get in there. It's just very zen to add all of them and to work on those areas. So I always enjoy the mouth and the eyes. And so then I'm going to go through, and so these wonderful creatures, they have several different sections of fur color on them. So the lower one across their chest and across their upper arms is going to be a very dark, almost black, dark gray fur. So I started out with some charcoal color paint, and then after I have that base layer done, I began with diluted lighter gray paint and some black paint. I'm going to be adding fur texture to it. And this area of the painting, much like the background, is kind of I consider this to be like the midground area of the canvas. So his face and the daisies are going to be your foreground. The daisies in the background are going to be the background. And then this area of fur that's kind of floating in the middle, it's not quite as blurry and fuzzy and out of focus as those first daisies we did with the airbrush, but it isn't as sharp and crisp as the future daisies will be, or as your face of your wonderful little baboon. You want it to have a much softer appearance. So with that being said, don't use a fine brush, use some diluted paint so it's not quite as precise, and when you're going over it, just have very very free movements with your paintbrush, and that will give you that very soft kind of fuzzy, slightly out of focus look. And then I'm going to be doing the next section of fur on my wonderful little guy here, and it's going to be more of an orange coppery color fur, kind of think of orange tabby in tone, and it kind of progressively lightens as it gets towards his head. So you want to have different shades out. You want to have some browns for sure, some different shades of beige and a cream, and some of those orangey copper colors, and just use all of those in conjunction with each other to add that next section of fur. And one thing I like to do to kind of keep in with that fuzzy out of focus look is I will take and I will dip my brush, a very damp brush, into a couple shades at a time, so like a orangey color and a cream, and that will blend the colors together, and it'll keep it a little bit out of your control, which a lot of times is not what you want. You want to be very in control of what your brush is doing, but in this circumstance, it leaves a little bit of the end result up to what the paint decides. And I think that in a slightly mid-ground out of focus type of a area, that is a nice little technique. So keep adding details where you want them. I'm going to add a little bit of detail to that ear that's sticking out over there, and then I'm going to fill in the rest of the head area with just a base layer of brown. Then going through, I'm going to be adding more precise lines and more precise details of the fur texture with some really dark gray paint. So that charcoal color paint I use all the time, the reason I use that instead of black is because I want to reserve the use of black paint for areas I really do want to be black. And so that's going to be areas around the eyes and the pupils, deep into the nostrils, those tones and those areas that you want to be darker than the rest so that they really draw the eye. So the rest of the painting, I try to avoid the use of black paint. So now after I have the first layer of fur texture down with the charcoal color paint, I'm going to be adding texture. So I have kind of a medium light beige, and on this area they have what is called ticked fur, and that means that the fur strands themselves have stripes, which is such an amazing coloration. I absolutely love animals with ticked fur. My kitty cat Max has ticked fur. And so when you're doing that, you want to add these tiny little lines, these little dashed lines going across. And so do that on not the very center of the top of the head, but down the sides of the face, and kind of like going up in this little, it kind of reminds me of a horned owl, just the way that those shapes go. So add all of that going across like so, and then add just a little bit, not that ticked fur appearance, but just a little bit of highlights in the fur area in the middle of the forehead and up the back of the head a little bit, like that. And I don't know if you guys can pick up the sound of this, but that cat Max I just mentioned is meowing outside the door right now. So if you guys hear a crying cat, it's not that she's being harmed in any way. She's just very sad that I locked her out at the moment. Then I'm going to go through with some diluted white and black paint and add shadows and highlights all over that head fur area. And then I'm going to be adding his beard and his mustache. So using creams and orange paints, very similar to the color in that middle area, like the shoulder area of his fur. I'm going to be adding all of those little chin hairs. And on these ones, you do want them to be nice, precise, sharp, crisp lines. So use a really fine detail striper brush and go through and add all of those. Add some little hairs on his nose as well, and then all over on that gray area that we blocked out for his lips. Go through and add those little lines, and you can even use some straight up white. Those lines on that area are a bit brighter than some of the other ones. And now I'm going to be adding the first little bit of my daisy. So I have really bright green stems, and then with a light to medium gray, I'm going to be adding kind of a little ghostly shadow of the flower petals. So just add all of the petals, and this is the first little layer of these flowers. So these flowers I did in several layers instead of doing like on the Baboon where I have all the colors out and I try to use them all at once. On this, I did little bits at a time. So then I'm going to be shadowing my stems. So I have a couple different shades of green, some black, some white, some brown. And I wanted to focus a little bit more of the brown color towards where the blossom is on them, and then have them be a little bit brighter on the lower part of the stem. You also want to make sure that you add some shadows on the daisies. And this painting is done from probably 20 different reference photos. And when you're doing the shadows and the highlights on the daisy, be conscientious that you're matching where the sun is coming from as where the sun is coming from on your Baboon. So you can really see that from where the highlight is on the eye. So know that that is where the sun is coming from, and try to imagine and visualize where the sun will be hitting the flowers as well, so that you have the same thing and it looks like it's all a cohesive little scene that's happening and it doesn't look patchwork together. So I know that that is something that It takes a little bit of thought, but if you can focus and really figure that out, it really makes the painting just look that much more like something that is actually going on. So then afterwards, I'm going to take some white paint and add the first layer of white to my petals. You're going to be blocking out, I'd say, about 80% of the gray paint in the background, but you do want to leave some of that there. And then I'm going to be adding all of the little details to the center of the flowers. I already had kind of a marigold color base on them, but add some oranges and add some bright whites in there, and then add a little bit of a bright green base to each of your petals. And that's done painting all of these flowers and this baboon. I absolutely love this painting. It's very childlike to me. So I hope you guys like it as much as I do, and don't forget to check out my Facebook and Instagram accounts for more of my art, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!